Teacher's language. This is a contrast. Thank you. Well said. I mean, not that they couldn't destroy us, but I wasn't worried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell them to bring a blanket. Shelley.
Maybe we kissed them.
Waiting for it. Hey, thank you. Sorry we got a little bit of a late start tonight. And why is that? It's because the board convened an executive session to consider matters related to the proposed, pending, and current litigation. If you can all now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all. I see we have some Boy Scouts here. That's the rumor around town. Thank you for coming. We hope to entertain you today. So we're going to start with the approval of minutes. Does anyone have any amendments to the minutes from December 14th and December 21st? Amazing. Put that in next week's minutes. Hearing none, we will approve the minutes as is. Treasurer's report which is action 4 and action 5, the approval of budget transfers. I'm going to take them together. We're looking at the treasurer's report from October 23 and November 23. Second, thank you. Okay, any questions, comments? All in favor? Excellent, thank you. Today, we have our report from the SGO, Paul Parakis. We're very excited you're back again. First of all, is the president okay? We are concerned.
She is fine.
She's fine.
Yes.
Everything's good.
I was just asked to fill in.
Say it again.
I was just asked to fill in today.
Okay. All right. Well, you give our regards. And we are looking for a report that's like a love letter. Give it like a love letter.
Right. Well, first off, if anyone had recently performed in last week's Acoustic Cafe, I would like to say congratulations. Secondly, I'd just like to say that the Acoustic Cafe this year was a success. we had a lot of great performers, and personally I attended and I had a very good time. Next, I'd like to talk about the upcoming basketball game on January 19th for our men's varsity basketball team, where for the entrance fee will be 1 can of non-perishable food, as we'll be running a food can drive, which will also be accounted for sports night points. And during the week leading up to sports night, we will also be doing another canned food drive, where the winners will be awarded points. Let's see. We have the senior play. We are currently doing rehearsals. That will be, I believe, in 2 weeks. I'm personally one of the main actors. It's gonna be a good time. It's a funny show. And we have playoffs upcoming for our varsity sports. So I'd like to just wish good luck to all those out there. And it's almost February break. So I'd like to talk about a little bit about the music trip that's coming up. We're going to Europe. All 3 ensembles have been practicing every single day, and we are very excited to get going and show our musical talent to other people of the world.
It's good. Amazing. Thank you so much. You're free to leave now. And now, unless you want to listen to Dr. Z's report, which also will be given like a love letter.
I'll stay for Dr. Z's report.
Okay.
Oh, Paul, I was going to say, you listen to me enough at assemblies at Seacliff School. You don't have to. That was a great job, Paul. Thank you. Happy New Year to North Shore. A very healthy, happy, and promising 2024. We had the pleasure this week of seeing some of our graduates. Several recent graduates met with our entire senior class, as well as with our parents, to answer questions and provide insight on their experiences transitioning to college. We are so very proud and appreciative of them. Forever Vikings, they were so generous with their time. It was tremendously valuable and for our students and for our families, and they gave us great insights, some of which we'll use in our May 30th presentation to the Board of Education on the transition to college and career. So if you are listening, some of them might be, thank you again. Junior College Night on that same vein will take place next Wednesday, the 17th at 7 p.m. So you can go to the basketball game on Thursday and Junior College Night the night before. National History Day took place today, and presentations, and every 8th grade student for several years now has presented at North Shore Middle School and created a presentation around a historical theme. This year's theme was on turning points in history, and we had some really creative projects that I'm sure you'll be seeing on Twitter and Instagram and on our website. Dr. Smythe and I had the pleasure of visiting middle school, talking to students. There was tremendous engagement and passion and ownership over the learning. And some of our Board of Education trustees were there, and it was a really great presentation. I will provide the board with links and samples of the projects if you weren't able to make it. But thank you for your support. And I want to thank Mr. Gordon, Mr. T at the middle school, and all of our social studies teachers for supporting the effort. Thank you. To announce that our middle school maskers will be performing Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella on February 2nd and February 3rd. We look forward to a great performance by our maskers in the middle. Congratulations to our women's winter track team who won the Conference 5 championship this week. We look forward to recognizing our fastest Vikings at an upcoming board meeting for their fall and winter achievements. We have some really great athletics events coming up on Friday. We have boys wrestling, varsity wrestling away at Seaford. We have boys varsity basketball home at 6:30 p.m. And we have our athletes in the middle, boys 8th and 7th grade basketball games, 7th grade home and 8th grade away. We also have on Saturday our JV and varsity girls team, basketball team at Port Washington. And we have our gymnastics and cheerleaders teams with events. I also want to give a shout out to our cheerleaders who had their first Section 8 home event here this past weekend. It was really great, and I'm continuously impressed with their grassroots approach to building that program, reaching out to the community, doing clinics. So thank you, cheerleaders. And a reminder, Middle School Winter Sports 2, Season 2 begins on Tuesday. Believe it or not, it's here already. It's also that time to begin, if you haven't already and you're eligible, kindergarten and UPK registration. I want to thank Ms. Newman for sending out a great postcard about our UPK program, and we'll be emailing that out as well, sending reminders. And Ms. Miller, myself, Dr. Smythe are always there to answer questions to our newest Vikings. Through our partnership with the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center last Friday, the 5th, Gina Zaninsky visited Glen Head School and told her story of survival to older students, faculty, and staff. She was born in Belgium in 1935, and with her family was forced to leave behind the lives that they had worked so hard to create and love when she was only 4 years old. She could still remember the sounds of enemy planes flying overhead as she sat terrified in her home. She's now in her late 80s. Such a amazing experience, powerful experience for our older students at Glen Head School, and this experience we'll be providing to all elementary students. We're also continuing our partnership with HMTC for our middle grades and our high school students. And finally, I just wanted to make a couple notes on budget. We are knee deep in the budget planning process, certainly not finished. As always, the question that guides our budget planning is, how do we create the best possible experience for students while balancing the pressures of revenue loss, rising costs, and the impact on taxpayers? So, you know, that balance that we're trying to strike of preserving the North Shore journey for our students while also preserving the North Shore community at the same time. We're completing budget projections for the 24-25 school year. From what we know so far, it does seem like last year we will have a gap to close this year of at least $3 to $4 million. It's very important that all stakeholders share their perspectives on the direction the district should take at both in terms of both the amount of cuts and where the cuts should come from. And we look forward to those community conversations. As you know, a major driver of this difficulty is a continued loss of revenue from LIPA and the plant closures and the county settlement with LIPA. In addition to losing our biggest taxpayer and the absorption of tax by our utility properties, the direct payment structure from LIPA is decreasing by another $2.4 million next year. In addition, we have lost $750,000 in grants that we have gotten over the last several years. So we're accounting for that. We're working within that. And I'm very confident that Mr. Pappas and I will have very clear recommendations for the board to choose from and to talk about, and also for our community to see and weigh in on. We are proceeding with our independent budget review, and it's based on a highly quantitative cost analysis through the lens of cost per pupil, which is something we've talked a lot about at North Shore over the last several years. We're comparing ourselves to Roslyn, Jericho, Herrickson, and Manhasset, other high-performing districts who have lower cost per pupil, to gain insights. And we will have a presentation on this data, and the analysis is really already providing valuable information that we've shared with our administrators. There will be a presentation at an upcoming board meeting. The data and analysis is based on data from the New York State Comptroller's Office and from the New York State Education Department. Mr. Pappas and I are working to present the budget in a more clear and user-friendly way. We will, of course, do the traditional budget reading code by code, but comments and discussion that we had in our earlier budget presentations in the fall really, I think, struck Mr. Pappas and I on how we can present the ingredients of the budget in a more clear way. And I think that's a problem, whether it's the local school district, the Department of Defense, the national budget, the state budget. It is really hard to decipher, and our goal is to be as clear as possible to show that we have explored every cent in this budget, as indeed we are. In addition to our community budget forum meeting several times, and we will have more meetings, we've also met with our revenue generation committee. We've had some really solid ideas. Both groups are small groups, but they are really smart groups, and we've had really solid conversations and ideas that we'll be talking about in our community budget meetings and in our board presentations. We do have an upcoming budget boot camp on January 23rd and February 6th at 7 p.m. Here at the middle school in the library. And we are working on rebranding, changing, improving our budget talks from last year. We understand they weren't super well attended and a little repetitive. So Ms. Newman and I and Mr. Pappas are thinking about organizing meetings by topic that are of concern to the community and to our parents. So, for example, rather than just presenting the same budget over and over again, we'll have meetings about class size and about APIB and about electives and talk about the budget in that context. So you'll be seeing more from us on that, but we're trying to make that more engaging. So thank you very much. Thank you for sitting through that. I hope you didn't regret it. Good to see you, Paul. Thank you all.
For all the students here of all ages, you can see how hard everyone is working to make sure that you have the best education possible. And it's not just the people who are employed here, all our residents who are participating in our groups, right, and collaborating to give all different kinds of ideas, help make North Shore a really great place, right? So thank you to everyone. Let's keep going. We have regular business tonight. It's our, I think, final achievement report, right? We're going to be talking about STEM. Yeah, we did. We combined it. Yep.
So I want to thank Mr. Minchell and Dr. Smythe for all their hard work on this report. It is the close of the series, the last of the three. And we'll be focusing on science, K through 12, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So we're going to ask the board to move to the seats, and we're going to watch as we have been and hand it over to Mr. Minchell and Dr. Smythe. Thank you. Dr. Smythe also does have hard copies of the presentation.
So thank you for the opportunity to report to you on student achievement in math, science, and STEAM this evening. I am Carol-Ann Smythe, the Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, and this is Steve Minchell, our Director of Science. So as you can see, we will root our conversation this evening in the North Shore Journey. We'll provide an overview of student achievement in math and science. Since our new director of math will not start until the end of the month, we will give her a little bit of time to review the secondary data with her department. So this evening, I will provide additional detail about math and STEM at the elementary level, and Steve will provide detailed information about science. We will discuss our areas of strength, our areas of focus in each discipline, and dig into our current work in each of the disciplines. Finally, we'll provide you with an overview of our next steps. So, as I mentioned, our work is firmly rooted in the North Shore Journey. As we work to design learning experiences that foster meaningful learning and authentic growth, promote student interests and growth with respect to those strengths, and support positive relationships and wellness. This journey is really driving our work, and you'll see that in the examples you see this evening. So we'll start with a brief overview of overall achievement as measured by test scores from our state assessments, our AP assessments, and our IB assessments. As we look at math achievement on our state assessments, our students' performance in math is strong on average, and our students' performance is better than the surrounding region by 20%. Of course, we do have students who opt out, but this data, as we dive into it, gives us a lot of information about individual students' in terms of their achievement and in terms of helping us drive next steps for our program and for our individual students. This is a brief overview of our performance on our math regions. And as you see, the performance is strong as indicated by both our proficiency rates and our mastery rates. On our two math AP exams, our students are performing well. And as you can see, we're particularly proud of the percentage of students who are receiving 5s on those exams. Finally, with respect to math, here are our IB scores, which again are strong in terms of the percentage of students that are passing. Now I'll turn it over briefly to Stephen, who will provide an overview of our science achievement.
Just wanted to say good evening to everybody. Happy New Year, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity to do this. As you can see, with one exception, which I will speak a lot about as we continue the presentation, I'm very proud of our region scores, especially the fact that chemistry rebounded so nicely from last year. That was one of our goals for this year, was to restabilize the chemistry scores, which we've done. Our regional gaps are excellent in living environment, earth science, chemistry, and those gaps are even higher if you look strictly at the performance questions, short answers or lab type questions, and that was outlined in the report that I gave to you. Obviously, physics is an area of concern, something that both Carol and I have been very focused on moving forward, and as I said, I'll speak more about that a little bit later on in the presentation. One thing I do want to mention, last year was the last year that the state provided what's known as a special accommodation that was kind of left over from the COVID years, in which students were allowed to pass the regents with a 50 as long as they passed the class. So in other words, like if you look at living environment, 93% proficiency, any student, that doesn't account for the students that got that special accommodation. So the passing numbers were actually a little bit higher, but they weren't reflected in these because these strictly went by grades of 50 to 64, 65, and up, so on. Our AP achievement in science are also very good, all higher than the New York State average. We could see especially high numbers of achieving scores of 3 to 5 in biology and chemistry. Although physics, again, is a laggard, it certainly is a respectable score, and we did, perform better than the New York State average there. So it seems like our top level physics classes are still performing at a good level. IB scores are, I'll be honest, they're not as impressive as our AP scores are. In some cases, we did perform slightly lower than the global average, but we still, scores 4 to 7, we're still above 50% on all of those. And biology, obviously, is our best performer at 83%. Lastly, we just take a quick look at computer science. In my new role this year as K-12, computer science is now under my jurisdiction. So although I wasn't, active in last year's scores, they are impressive. So I'll take full credit for them. Why not? But you can see we had 100% scores 3 to 5, and did very well over the New York State average. And IB as well in computer science was quite impressive.
So now I will talk a little bit about areas of strength and focus in elementary math and STEAM, and also dig into some of the work that we're doing in those disciplines as far as continuous improvement goes. So in terms of looking at our strengths, data from a range of assessments, including our STAR tests, our state tests, and our internal assessments, suggests that our students are not only just demonstrating strong achievement, but more importantly, they're showing high levels of growth. In addition, we have worked very hard to provide strongly aligned, intentional, and responsive systems of curriculum, instruction, and assessment. In addition, we'll take a look at STEAM this evening, and again, we're providing high quality and assured STEAM learning experiences to all of our students in grades K through 5. An ongoing area of focus, which will be an area really that we're working on even into this year, is the performance of our subgroups, because we continue to see our Ls and our students classified with learning disabilities performing lower with respect to both proficiency and mastery. So that really remains an ongoing area for us to work on. So like we did with our report on humanities, we'll take a look at really the work we're doing currently in the disciplines in order to continue to improve in response to what we're seeing. So our work in elementary math and STEAM is really inspired by our why statement, which is very closely aligned with the North Shore Journey. Specifically, the elementary math and STEAM department strives to motivate and compel the development of individuals with the skills and dispositions of thinkers and problem solvers who are prepared and inspired to work both individually and collaboratively to make sense of, understand, and improve the physical and natural world for themselves and others. In elementary math, we've adopted a philosophy of math learning which prioritizes the development of our students as problem solvers, while fostering our students' understanding of concepts, facility with processes and skills, in addition, and very importantly, to positive attitudes about themselves as math learners. Our talented and dedicated teachers have implemented our student-centered and inquiry-based approach to instruction. And finally, we've really developed a refined support system to provide appropriate support and challenge to each learner. So again, as we continue to look at what are the things we can get better with, one recent challenge, particularly since the pandemic, that we've been working on centers around this area of fact fluency. We had been noticing that some of our students were really lacking efficiency with procedures and problem solving. At the same time, there's been a good deal of research and literature being shared about best practices in developing students' fact fluency. So what we really did as a group with the faculty and our math support team is we reviewed the research and then developed and implemented a new approach to fact fluency in our kindergarten through 3rd grade classrooms. The approach is rooted in the following definition of fluency, which is a little bit different than what you might think, particularly as growing up, thinking about fluency as just being able to answer something quickly. So the work of Jennifer Bay Williams, who's done a lot of work in this area, she defines and says fluency is not really about speed, but rather it includes accurate, efficient, flexible, and appropriate solving of problems. Because when students are fluent in basic facts, they can solve complex mathematical problems more efficiently. If a student has to spend a lot of time on basic calculations, it can overload their working memory and hinder their ability to grasp more advanced concepts. When the facts are automatic, cognitive resources can be directed towards understanding and higher order problem solving. So again, the research really says the path to fact fluency goes through 3 phases. Phase 1 is a counting strategy. That's when students are using objects such as blocks and their fingers and verbal counting to develop their answer. 3 plus 2 is 5. They're thinking about 3 plus 2 is 5. And that's that natural first piece of fact fluency. Then we want to move them to phase 2, which is the reasoning strategies. And in that stage, we're asking them to use what they know about previous facts to figure out something new. So for example, they might want to look at relationships and patterns. So a student who knows, for example, that 5 plus 5 is 10 would use that to figure out 5 plus 7. They know 5 plus 5 is 10, plus 2 more gives them 12. So we really want to teach them with very strategic mechanisms to develop those reasoning strategies. And then finally, phase 3, students become efficient, fast, and accurate as the result of practice over time. So again, in this study that we did, what we really realized is it's much more efficient and effective for students to learn facts in a particular order. So they'll learn foundational facts first and then use what they learned about those foundational facts to become fluent in the derived facts. So again, in this chart, students would use what they know about adding 0, adding 1, and combinations of 10 to use a strategy such as making 10. So our math support team thought through the research, really dug into those progressions, and planned how we could incorporate this work across the grade levels. So they've designed instruction, we've embedded lessons on our curriculum, and the math support team has taken leadership roles in modeling instruction in the classroom. So here are just a few examples of our students really thinking about how to explicitly use these fact strategies. So to give you a window into what this instruction looks like, we always start with giving students a context. So to provide an example of the strategy of making 10, the fact fluency work starts with stories to provide real-world context for students to understand why they would even use a strategy. So here we see an example of a character, Spiky, adding points from 2 rounds of a video game. Then the next stage is really to help kids really start to visualize these facts. That'll help them really understand what's happening. So we use these pictures called quick looks. And as students look at these quick looks, we'd ask them questions like, what do you see? How would you say it? So here we see an example of 9 plus 6. That's paired with what we call this paired look, which gets to the strategy. So again, 9 plus 6, that's the fact we want kids to solve. But what we want to show them is this then 10 plus 5. To show them 10 plus 5 is the same as 9 plus 6, and that visualization will help it be easier for them to use that plus 10 strategy. The final stage that we've been implementing, and this is really, I think, where the heart of it is getting kids to practice in fun and meaningful ways. So what we'll have is a game tied to each strategy, and the kids will play these games, which are fun and engaging, but the games will be targeted to a particular strategy. So for example, this game is targeted at that make 10 strategy. So 2 students, they're starting with adding 8, but we'll use that plus 10 that making 10 strategy to figure out the answer. And it's that practice over time that's targeted at a particular strategy that'll help kids become much more fact fluent. So we've been working on these strategies for about a year now, and we're really beginning to see the impact. And again, it's getting away from rote memorization, because with rote memorization, if students are just forced to remember, if they forget, they don't have a fallback. If they're working with strategies, they'll have multiple ways of solving problems. Okay, so our second challenge that we've really been working on is really enhancing the way we provide support to students. Again, our math support team has really been working to refine the way we provide support in order to really help students grow. For Dr. Z's direction, we've implemented an MTSS plan, which has really taken the place of our RTI plan, where we're trying to provide appropriate levels of support to each student. And our math team has spent a lot of time thinking about what are the screeners that we're using? How are we using screening information? How are we monitoring progress? How are we really discussing students and figuring out what each student needs, and then monitoring what it is that we're doing for them? We've always been doing these things, but we've really tried to fine tune the way we're doing them to make it much more efficient and responsive to what our students are doing. So one of the nice things we get from our STAR data is information not only about student achievement, but about student growth. So this graph and this table represents all of the students who got any form of extra support, however short-lived, in math during the 22-23 school year. And what you'll see is really high levels of growth. So even students who aren't quite proficient yet, we're really seeing much higher levels of growth than we have in the past. And we feel that those levels of growth are really allowing us to help students close the gap. And part of this is really our work with intervention. So again, if you look on the left-hand side, those are all the students who are demonstrating high growth. The burgundy are students who are showing high proficiency. And the final piece in terms of challenges that I wanted to talk about is related to elementary STEAM. So as you know, our elementary STEAM program provides students with assured experiences where they can apply the engineering design process, develop their understanding of computer science and robotics, and deepen their understanding of science learning. One of our recent challenges we've been working on over the past several years is the implementation of the new computer science and digital fluency standards. So Mr. Bridgewood, one of our elementary STEAM teachers who was here a few meetings ago with some of his students, has really done a wonderful job incorporating these standards in age-appropriate ways across the grade levels. So in our elementary computer science and robotics program, and he works with all of our K-5 students at some point during each school year, we introduce our youngest learners to the world of programming. So through interactive and hands-on experiences, students develop an understanding of foundational concepts in computer science, and they improve their computational thinking skills. More broadly, the students participate in enriching activities to help them strengthen their abilities as problem solvers, critical thinkers, and collaborators as they learn to code. In order to address the standards and to ensure that our students are engaged, in our elementary computer science component, you'll see two distinct approaches to computer science education. Creative computing refers to the approach to learning and problem solving that emphasizes creativity, expression, and exploration. So, for example, this is our use of the Scratch program. Our students across the grade levels draw upon their creativity, imagination, and interest as they create and program their own animations, music, and games. It really allows them to tap into and develop their creative thinking, in addition to developing their understanding of core programming concepts. With physical computing, this involves the integration of computer science with the physical world. So our program uses this approach with activities and lessons with age-appropriate robots. Students learn various computer science concepts and principles with physical robots that help us make more abstract concepts very concrete for students. So for example, you'll see, as you see in the pictures, some kindergarten students that are really just thinking about sequences, which lays that foundation for algorithms. So Mr. Bridgewood has done a really excellent job in terms of thinking about a progression of our learning. So starting in kindergarten, our students learn to begin to think about and solve problems algorithmically. They identify and decompose problems into multiple smaller steps. They learn to think sequentially and to think about what is an algorithm. And they begin to make abstractions and really learn to communicate their computer science thinking. The kindergarten students design mazes and code pathways for their robot friends to follow. By first and second grade, our students begin to learn specific concepts in computer science. They explore concepts such as loops and conditionals. They notice that repetitive tasks can be handled easily by computers using loops. In conjunction with computer science, the students learn about core concepts of engineering, such as simple machines, gears, pulleys, etc., because each robot is really centered on a particular type of mechanism. By upper elementary, our students are learning very advanced programming languages such as Blockly and Scratch and develop deep understanding of concepts. So they learn about if statements and loops. They gain familiarity with the concepts, they learn the associated vocabulary, and they really shift to this real coding process. Students apply what they learn creatively, getting back to that idea of creative programming. And basically, they're getting increasing complexity over time and really enjoying the process through the lessons that they're experiencing. So really again, this is a challenge that we're continuing to think about how to really provide these experiences to students in developmentally appropriate ways. So finally, as I mentioned before, our next steps for elementary math and STEAM, first, we really want to dig into that performance of our subgroups. We've already started looking at the research, really trying out strategies to help the performance of our subgroups, such as our Ls and our students classified as special ed. What do they need that's different? What do they need different in the classroom? And what do they need that's different in the intervention setting? And again, our secondary focus is really this continued attention to our new standards. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Steve to talk more about science.
So it's a nice opportunity because we actually have a strength that is so hot off the press that it does not appear on here. But as many of you may have heard, we had 2 Regeneron scholars, top 300 scholars. That's, top 300 in the world. And we're very proud. Claire Tao and Michelle Yu. We're going to celebrate them at a future board meeting. But that news just came in yesterday afternoon. And, I don't have to tell anybody here what an achievement that is. But what I will say is, as I told my department when I sent out like a congratulatory email today, was although Dr. Mordechai certainly deserves a lot of the credit for her hard work and serving as such a good role model, it's the village, right? It's the entire department from kindergarten up. It's maybe that one second grade teacher that first, sparked an interest. It's certainly an AP bio teacher that, maybe helped a student with live specimens or, research. But, it's all of them. And that's kind of what I want to base what I'm about to show you, is really looking at a continuum because every piece of that puzzle is so integral to the success of students. And the success is not always measured in Regeneron scholarships, right? It's measured into just feeling good about yourself in the science classroom. It's about a struggling student feeling good after achieving something that they worked really hard for. And yeah, it's also about that kid who gets into the school they always wanted to go to, but it's everybody working together to make that happen. So part of that would be high achievement in AP scores. increased enrollment in science research class. So another thing I'm very proud about our science research is we have our largest introductory classes that we've ever had in the high school. So more and more kids are interested in going into that area as to enhance their science experience. We have high participation in all 4 years of high school. As outlined in my report, science could be 3 years in the high school and then that could be it, but that's not the case here at all. We have, almost, I believe the number was like 86% of our seniors are continuing to take a science course. And we had high positive gaps in all areas of especially performance tasks. While we did have high positive gaps in all areas of testing, it remains to be our performance task assessments, the earth science lab practical, the part 2 questions on regions, the short answer or long answer. Certainly the 4 state labs in living environment, the questions based on that. We just blow away the competition on that. And it's not incidental. It's because our teachers really focus on that. And as I said last year at this time, if you walk through the halls, you'll see crazy things going on in science with students up on desks and all over the place. So that remains to be something I'm really proud of. In terms of area of focus, I do want to, as Carol mentioned, I also want to look at our subgroups. While our special ed population does do well, we really would like to see the numbers in mastery increase there. And certainly our physics scores are something that we want to work on and have been working on. So in terms of physics, I do, I do want to talk about it. The midterm is usually a really good indicator for us in any science subject of what we can expect on the regions. So if you look at the physics midterm, while there's still room for improvement there, it certainly was not what we saw on the regions. I think a 74% passing rate over 54, that 20% is obviously something that we would have ended up loving to strive for there. Out of that 74%, there was extra help and AIS afforded to students that needed that. And so when we did see the region scores, it really kind of took me by surprise, to be honest. So what are we doing in terms of this year? So obviously it starts with conversations. So we're having much more frequent check-in meetings with the teachers. I'm in the classrooms a lot more, and then we're meeting on a regular basis. Last year, only 2 of our 3 physics teachers were teaching a region section. This year, I wanted all 3 teachers to have at least 1 section of physics R so that there was more common planning time and they could help each other out, more collegiality. They are 3 very different types of teachers. So I think by working together and helping each other in areas that maybe is not within their wheelhouse is creating a better environment going forward. All of our summative assessments this year are going to be spiraling older topics as a means of constant review. We're limiting the technology in the physics classroom. We're really fostering a lot more paper and pencil solutions of equations that require a deeper understanding of procedure and units. When you only use calculators and computers, the units seem to disappear. People, you don't think about them. Certainly students, as they're plugging in numbers, are not focusing on the units. And the units, as Mr. Galati, I'm sure could tell you, the units are almost giving away the answers in a lot of cases. If you follow the map that the units lay out for you, it really leads you to that solution. So we really are trying to foster now a lot more students working out long form on paper and pencil to really show what they understand or what they don't understand. We did an analysis of the the topics on the Regents that seem to be more frequent over the past 3 to 4 years. And what we're trying to do, you know, it's kind of like a double-edged sword in the sense I'm bragging about how well we do on performance tasks and type questions like that. But that takes a lot of time. And when you have a jam-packed curriculum, you need to afford that time and ration it efficiently. So we're looking at doing more direct teaching for some of the topics that don't make up a large percentage of points on the Regents exam, and kind of just we're covering it, but we're trying to cover it in a way that moves a little faster and gets to the heart of the matter, so we can spend that performance test time on some of the other topics that require that. That goes hand in hand with more opportunities for students to explain their understanding. We're trying to have conversations with the students where we can really hear, they can explain their thought process. We can really get at any misconceptions that might exist. And lastly, holding students more accountable for quality of their classwork and homework. This kind of goes with the limiting the point recapturing ability there. I'm not saying that we baby the kids in any year, but there was an awful lot of opportunity to get extra credit or to retake something or to try and recapture points, and there's value in that. I'm not negating that does have a place, but we're trying, at least at the beginning of the year, to hold off on that, to establish good classroom techniques for the students to really have a metacognitive sense of how they are actually doing on the first go round of something, not after they've had a chance to really regain points and stuff. So, there is a place for that, and we still want students to feel like they have multiple opportunities to express their knowledge. But for right now, at the beginning of the year, we really feel that it's important to hold the students a lot more accountable. Midterms are coming up soon. We will certainly analyze every aspect of the midterm. The midterm was even created with the past Regents in mind, as we looked at the questions and learning standards that our students performed poorly on, and we're making sure to hit all of those types of questions on the midterm exam. Okay, so let's talk about more fun stuff now. I forgot to mention, the U.S. News and World Report was very good last year. So #2 STEM High School on Long Island was something we were really proud of. And we actually had Paul Anderson here. For those of you that don't know Paul, he's an amazing science guru, let's say, in terms of next generation science standards. And I want to thank the board and central office for allowing us to have 4 days with him to be spent with every level of teaching from 5th grade on up through seniors in high school. So what I'd like to talk about in my time is really the next generation science standard learning progressions. And I want to follow one standard through the grades, starting with 5th grade and moving on up. Also want to introduce to you the PLDs, performance learning descriptors, which the state has really been working on, and some of the unique ways that we're using that to create our own North Shore PLDs, because we need more acronyms in education. So this is an example of a learning progression that was made by New York State. It deals with Earth and Space Science Standard, ESS 1.8. And the main topic here is what is the universe and what goes on in stars. And for each column, K through 2, 3 through 5, and so on, is what the students are expected to know at that grade level. This is not the learning standard itself, but rather a progression of the same standard through a child's North Shore journey. And this is the same, this is B, that was A, this is B, and this one, it deals in the same standard, what are predictable patterns caused by Earth's movement in the solar system. Now the standard itself looks something like this. I'm not going to go on and read any of this, but I just wanted to show you this is the actual standard. Those learning progressions kind of take into account all of this. So what I'm trying to exemplify here is there's a lot of materials here. There's a lot of resources. There's a lot for teachers to really try and dig their teeth into as they plan their lessons and plan their assessments. So what does this look like in grade 5? So grade 5, ESS 1-A is dealing with stars range greatly in size and distance from Earth, and B, the Earth's orbit and rotation. So in terms of what that looks like in the classroom, it worked. So these are a couple of lessons that are done through Mystery Science. Mystery Science is a learning platform. We pay for it, but it's really worthwhile. I believe that it really creates an assured experience for all of our elementary students. And what I love about it is it gives you everything you need, but yet it also allows the teacher to be innovative and creative and express the lesson in the way they want. I can honestly say I've seen 3 different teachers do the same Mystery Science lesson, and every time I've seen it, it's been completely different. They kind of get to pick and choose the elements that they want to use. So if we take just a quick look at some of this. So in this lesson, the students discover that the Earth is in the quote-unquote Goldilocks zone, a distance from the sun with the right amount of light and heat for life to exist. And in the activities, Star Explorer, students plan a space mission to another planet outside of our solar system, and they base that on all these different variables that they would need to use. If we take a look at another lesson, this is Spaceship Earth. In this lesson, students will learn why our ancestors divided the day into hours, how clocks measure the sun's apparent movement, and so forth, all dealing with the same standards. In this lesson, students are introduced to Earth's orbital movements around the sun as a means of seeing why the constellations change. They make a universe in a box and use that paper model to help them visualize what's going on. And then finally, in this lesson, students discover how the sun's path changes with the seasons and so on. So it's a really good platform, and it addresses a lot of the standards that we were looking at in the progression. Let's get back to full screen. That's elementary. Grade 6 and 7 takes a different approach to these standards. Students do a reading on different latitudes and the amount of daylight hours there are at different times of the year. And they use this data, they collect this data, and they put it into a class chart, and they analyze the data to be able to answer questions like this, where they can have a model of the solar system and understand how the season and the tilt of the Earth affects the amount of daylight and causes different amounts of solar radiation to reach different parts of the planet. Then finally, in high school, so this obviously is the most rigorous of the standards. And I'm just going to do one more connection here. So this is an example of a star life cycle and classification lab. And what I want to get to here, it's a lengthy lab with a lot of activities for the students to self-explore. And the main part I wanted to show you here was, sorry. So this is a really good simulator that the students use called Star in a Box. And what this enables them to do is to study different stars on their own based on the mass. So you can increase or decrease the mass of the star compared to the sun, and you can investigate that star for its temperature, for its luminosity, for its life cycle, how many years does it spend on the main sequence, then what eventually happens to it, mass, and then you can illustrate that. Let me just put normal speed. So that is moving. So that would be the life cycle of stars. And this, as a former earth science teacher, I guess I'm still an earth science teacher, this used to be done strictly by using the reference table and just reading charts. The interaction here makes it much more independent work and really allows the students to kind of assess their own knowledge on this. That was, those standards through the North Shore journey. And of course, this is an old favorite for anybody that had a child in earth science, is the ellipse lab. Covers the elliptical orbits, just using push pins and string to kind of measure the relationship between focal points and the eccentricity of a planet's orbit. Okay, so the next part here, I want to just talk a little bit about New York State's performance learning descriptors, or PLDs. These kind of go along with performance on Regents exams. When we grade the exams and we kind of sum up and analyze all the data, we're looking for really, level 1 and 2 would be not passing or not up to standard. 3 is usually proficiency, 3 into 4 is proficiency, and then 4 into 5 is kind of that mastery category. And if you were to read these, I'll just give you the difference between, so like level 3 wants students to complete a model based on evidence, whereas level 4 wants you to develop a model based on evidence, and level 5 is develop and critique models based on evidence that illustrates the lifespan of the sun. So you can see there's an increased rigor that's going on here. And these were originally intended to really grade assessments, but what I really wanted to do with the science department is use these to kind of create the assessments in terms of backwards design. What do we really want our students to do to achieve these different levels of success? So I was thinking about the North Shore journey, and in terms of meaningful learning and academic growth, and certainly growth in academic proficiency and mastery, I really felt like we could utilize these PLDs, but by creating our own, because we just think of mastery really in any classroom as an 85 or above, because that's kind of what New York State always told us it should be. But maybe there's other subcategories. Maybe part of the problem is that we're asking our students to make too big a leap from being in let's say the low proficiency range up to mastery. And maybe there's something even above mastery that we should acknowledge and consider. So I worked really hard with my department on superintendent conference day and on Monday meetings, and we tried to come up with our own North Shore PLDs and learning descriptors. So the first part of this is strictly quantitative. This is pure numbers. So we did create a couple of other performance categories. Below standard, obviously, is below 65. But then instead of having 65 up to 85, my department wanted to break it down to 65 to 74 as being developing. And that would kind of go along with the state PLD of categories of column 1 and column 2. And then proficiency, we felt from 75 to 84, and that kind of falls into the state's PLD of column 2 and 3. Then came mastery, but we have mastery only going up to 94. And that would be PLD 3 and 4. And then finally, we created a distinguished category, which would be 95 to 100. And that kind of went with those last two columns I showed you before. So numbers are great, but to me, this is really what I was interested in. My teachers, we put them in groups of interdisciplinary areas, so we had chemistry working with physics, we're working with middle school. And the question was basically, so what do these, PLDs, what are the characteristics? What's the qualitative data on what the students are actually doing in each column? So just to read a few, developing is a student who may often miss class and doesn't do homework consistently. A mastery may have excellent attendance, go to multiple extra help sessions regularly, self-advocate. Distinguished students may do everything within the mastery column, but then they also transfer knowledge to new situations at an extremely high level, help other students both in class and at extra help, and so on. So what are the uses of something like this? And that's kind of where we are right now. We're trying to really figure out what's the best way to utilize this. So some of the possible benefits and uses that we feel are it can really serve as a meaningful foundation for student conversations, whether student to student or certainly teacher with student, if they're going over an exam or maybe at the end of the quarter, to really have that North Shore PLD progression with you and say, well, this is kind of why this quarter you're still developing because this, and this. We also feel it helps a student with a lot of their own metacognitive thinking and growth. If they can really put their finger on what they're not doing or what they are doing, it really helps them review how they study, how they, the amount of quality time that they're really putting into their work. It creates a smaller atomic habit style move to progress. So Atomic Habit was a great book that the administrators read here over a summer conference day. And if you're not familiar with it, it talks about making small movements, like just little habit changes that impact, if you do enough of them, eventually you've now really changed your habit and your approach. So that kind of alludes back to what I was talking about before, where, it would be much easier maybe for a student to go from developing to proficient by making a small adjustment in one thing that they're doing, which then would hopefully steamroll them into much bigger progressions and improvement. It can certainly serve as a rubric for behavioral components of grades. So much of our grading, we talk about giving effort and attitude types of grades, but we never really know what's the best, how do you really assign a value to that? Well, maybe the PLD can help with that as well. Certainly can help motivate students that want to excel at the highest level. So, whereas before it was like, oh, you mastery, you're doing great. Well, maybe now we'll have some of those kids that really are shooting for distinguished. And what can I do to get there? How can I do that? And we can really help pinpoint that with this. And finally, it can help teachers in making difficult grading decisions for students that are on the borderline of two-letter grades. We often sit there with a student that has like a 87, 88, and we certainly in our heart, we want to pop them up to that 90. But maybe by using something like this, we make that conversation more about talking with the student and saying, look, this is where you are right now. And I really promise you next quarter, if you do this and this, we can bump you up and really make those changes. And this is just a quote I thought was really good from Atomic Habits. And it says, complaining about not achieving success despite working hard is like complaining about an ice cube not melting when you heated it from 25 to 31 degrees. Your work was not wasted. It's just being stored. All the action happens at 32 degrees. So I really think, after reading this, it really made me realize that I think what we're trying to do and what the benefits of really trying to find good uses and actively using the North Shore PLDs is to get to that 32 degrees. Let's help our students get to that 32 degrees. And that's really the point at which anything is possible. So in terms of our next steps, we want to continue in secondary science to prepare students for the new NGSS Regents exams, which will start being available next year, although you do have the option to still put it off for a year, which does have its benefits in terms of being able to see the new exams, what they look like, and which can kind of structure our instruction. So we are seriously considering just waiting that extra year. Also preparing curriculum for our new AP Physics C course. And next year, we're going to be offering a calculus-based physics to replace the IB offering. Implement the NSPLDs for assessment, writing, and grading. And then in elementary science, this is the first year of the new grade 5 exam, which is a computer-based testing. So we're very involved in getting all of our elementary teachers to be doing that. Thank you.
I'd like to give a shout out to those Canva slides. I mean, I saw them. It's like the new PowerPoint. I saw it at a conference. It's so updated. They're really great. Better you than me. All right, thank you so much. All right, so let's get started here. Who would like to go first? Vice President Colasiopa.
I don't have much, so I'll go first and be quick. Well, first of all, thank you so much. Thank you both so much for the presentation, for the 122-page backup. I really enjoyed reading through the backup. I thought the information, I mean, so much data, you know, it's just so helpful to be able to analyze that, to be able to look at it, to see how we are really doing. I really appreciate all the work you put into it, all the work that the teachers are doing. It's incredibly impressive. So thank you so much. I was curious, and you talked about a little in the backup, and you talked about MTSS, and I'm just wondering, you know, our goal is to meet the needs of every student, obviously, and we have those who need more of a challenge, we have those who need more assistance, and then we have those in the middle who we don't want to lose track of either. And I was wondering if you just talk a little bit more about how you catch each of those subgroups.
Sure. So first I'll talk from the elementary perspective. So we used to have an RTI plan, which is response to intervention. We've evolved that into MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, which not only talks about academic, but also behavioral and social emotional needs for students. So we're really in the early stages of that transition. So for example, in elementary math, the math team meets every 6 weeks and reviews student data from all students. So we're capturing how are they performing on our STAR assessment? How are they doing on classroom assessments? What are teachers saying in terms of their progress? And that really allows us to think about, okay, what are the things that everybody might need? So are there trends that maybe all third grade classrooms, we need to do something different? Or in terms of either enrichment or extra support. So, you know, maybe our pacing is going too quickly. We need to do a little bit more with adding or subtracting fractions. So that's kind of the general, but then we're also able to look at for specific students, what they need. So some students, in addition to classroom support, may need extra help from the classroom teacher or something more extensive involving one of our math support teachers. So we talk about each student, and then what is it that that student needs? Does it, you know, going to that triangle, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, based on the assessment information we're looking at, let's try these things for this amount of time. And then, the teachers the classroom teachers and the intervention teachers provide those supports. On the other end, we also have our enrichment teachers who will provide, that extra that some kids need. Sometimes that enrichment is provided by the classroom teacher in terms of anchor activities or something different. But sometimes, kids see our enrichment specialists and get more advanced problem solving or something in that line. Fast forward 6 weeks, we come back again. So how is it going? Let's kind of take a relook at. So really it's spending, a day every 6 weeks and kind of looking at all students. But really that individualized approach really lets us kind of keep a pulse on how students are doing, but also to really provide what it is that each individual needs. That process is mirrored in literacy. It looks a little bit different, but really that's kind of our process that we're using.
Secondary level, middle school, obviously teaming is a big part of what a middle school should be. So we do have the teams meeting regularly. We have a lot of support in place, and we have variable support in the sense that I have enough because of the elective program in the middle school, I have enough teachers who we purposely keep a little bit of open FTE time that if I need another science teacher to push into a living environment lab, which is something we scheduled out for this year, I have that available so that we actually have 2 sections of living environment that have 2 science teachers and special ed co-teacher in the classroom at that time. For right now, we're in midterm support mode. At the 8th grade level, I was able to take another science teacher who had time available and have her push into the skills class so she could work on midterm review with the students along with the special ed teacher. At the high school, I think it starts with the amount of classes and the different levels of rigor that we offer. There's a pathway for every type of student. But we still want to encourage all students to take science at the highest level, certainly that they feel comfortable with. And again, it really comes down to, support from the teachers. I think we probably offer more scheduled extra help than any other district on Long Island. And that's not the panacea. Extra help is not the be all end all. And we spend a lot of time really trying to not just have students come to extra help, but rather to plan for coming to extra help, to really write down, why are you here? I don't want you here because your mom said you have to come here. I'm here because I didn't understand this, this, and this, and I really need help in those areas. And then after midterms, we will assess the performance on those midterms and structure small groupings I call it AIS. It's not really like New York State AIS, but we run several sections either during a student's off period or lunch period where they will meet at least once every 5 days with a cohort that will, help go over the midterms, what they got wrong, and then continue support through the Regents exams.
Thank you so much. I just had one other quick question. I couldn't help but notice all the math problems, how wordy they are now, how much, you have to be able to read to get to the actual math problem. So I was thinking about our struggling readers. How do we, because it's not like, what's 6 times 7? It's, you have to figure out, how to get to 6 times 7. So I'm just wondering, those children that struggle with reading, how do we help them in that portion of math?
I think, right, for us, it's really 2 things. One, separating those 2 things and figuring out sometimes when kids are struggling, what is the problem? Is it reading? Is it math? Is it some combination? And then providing the appropriate intervention. So for some students who really do struggle with unpacking the workbook, you want to teach them how to do that, but you also want to make sure they're learning the math parts of that as well. And then teaching them strategies to kind of move them forward in the trajectory. But for some students, it may mean taking that reading piece out for a while so that we're making sure that they understand the math. And then using strategies, we've worked really closely with our literacy counterparts in terms of what strategies would be effective. Sometimes it's, one of the best strategies we found is visualizing. Really, as you read this question, what are you seeing in your head? And then how can you translate that? So we've really tried to take the strategies that students are using to learn literacy to help them with that math piece. But that absolutely continues to be something we continue to work on.
Next up.
Thank you both. It was a very good presentation. I appreciate the early age success that our students are having. Certainly, those superlative numbers with regard to our neighbors and the state in general speak for themselves. The opt-outs you mentioned, but really of the, I looked at those numbers and that were reported, and we're in the middle of the top half of the number of the percentage taking them. So we're right there, but our success numbers are really at the tippy top. So that was great. I appreciated your focus on those areas that need that attention. I understand why upper level math was not necessarily included here, but I know from the voluminous backup that you provided that you're certainly on that as well. It's certainly very easy to make the connection between the higher level math and physics, because anyone who's taken physics knows that it's a lot of math, and the conceptual math that you get by having done at other higher levels. So I appreciate that you're focused on that. Two questions I had: what you mentioned, Mr. Minchell, about sort of the lack of, or I guess the removal of things like extra credit and sort of short on time. So I'll just use the word coddling if I'm gonna come up with that. That's gonna be ending. I'm just wondering, that sort of seems like an age-old philosophical debate within the pedagogical community, and I wonder sort of the underpinnings of the shift. Is that anecdotal? Is there what's behind it?
I mean, the one thing that's been in place as long as I've been doing this is consistency. So, we don't mandate what an individual teacher can and can't do in terms of, well, let's just call it point recapturing. As long as it's consistent. If there are 4 teachers teaching earth science, they all have to do the same thing. So that's the most important. Really, I was specifically speaking about that in regards to physics regents right now. We had some difficult conversations after seeing that. I mean, Carol and I sat down with the teachers, and I hope Carol will, back me up when I wasn't taking any excuses, and not in a mean way, but in a way to say that I'm sure there's a reason for what happened, but a lot of what their approach to what went wrong, maybe could have been argued if our gap wasn't so negative to the rest of the district, because every district on Long Island, we all have the same playing cards dealt us. Yes, physics is it's a day before graduation, but it is for everybody, right? It's whatever, other things like that. And I wasn't having any of that. At least if our gap was 0, then we could say, all right, well, everybody was affected by that. So we started looking at, maybe some of their qualitative assessment of students just kind of not working as hard as they should be working, and not taking it as seriously as they should. And we kind of came to a consensus, again, strictly for that course, that maybe it would be better, at least for the beginning of the year up until midterm, if we kind of just kept raw score as the go-to. That, let's not worry about recapturing points, let's worry about earning points. So that was kind of the impetus behind that.
I understand that. It's sort of, I was thinking about it in the context of alignment with the district and how we do things. There certainly there are many approaches to education, to parenting. There's the idea of give me 100 push-ups kind of thing when people aren't doing,
Right.
and that as opposed to other approaches. you mentioned many acronyms, which I actually appreciate. I think that's helpful. I didn't hear the letters SVO at all in the presentation today. I didn't, and so I don't know if that is a departure or if that's so embedded within what we do here that this doesn't need to be said. But I wonder if those, I just wonder about how all these pieces fit together and the alignment of those things. We want to support our kids in a very North Shore way that's been successful. In my time on this board, one of the, among the many satisfactions I've had from this and other chairs has been seeing the success of our students on traditional learning metrics when we didn't teach them specifically to do those things, but through embedding them with, as Carol talked about, reasoning strategies. I wrote here reasoning strategies like alligator mouth over rote memorization, and the conceptual underpinnings behind those things, and being communicators, being innovative, all these different things that we stress as part of the learning environment. If that is the path potentially that should also be part of this matrix.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, I'll speak just personally for myself. I think framing it, I think, I tried to frame it now more within the North Shore journey, which to me is hand in hand with the SVOs. That's the base, that's the foundational piece for everything we do. So while it wasn't explicitly stated as SVOs, it's certainly always part of the conversation.
I do want to mention, I think where you would see it, and we didn't read it line by line, are in the learning progressions. You really do see the growth of the conceptual understanding and those skills like critical thinking, communication, collaboration, certainly too. And I would say too, just observing the classes, and that's where, that seeing it in action is so key. We always, and sometimes we'll show the board videos, put videos online because it is hard to extract what is actually happening. I think the how of learning in our classrooms really very much embodies, and there's variation of course, but embodies the SVOs in terms of the process of learning. But I do appreciate that feedback because I think it's worth looking at how we show that.
Yeah, I appreciate the answers, and I know there's so much thought that goes into these things. From this board, we sort of, toward the end of last year when there were discussions from parents and it was in the community about grading policy and, the idea of, well, if you have forgiveness, then there could be less motivation. But if you don't have the forgiveness, then you're potentially disincentivizing those who work really hard, but maybe don't do as well. I certainly don't have the answers to those questions, but I am extremely proud of you guys for grappling with those as you come up with the answers to improve these things. Thank you.
I was just, no? You sure? Go ahead. Come on, take it home.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Most of my questions or comments will be dealing with physics, unfortunately. Things, and this is my own fault. I would have appreciated, and I should have asked for this earlier on. We got percentages basically for everything, and it would be more helpful to me to actually look at population, because the only one that I really saw that was with the physics class. Because if 50% of your kids are failing an exam, but you've got 100 kids as opposed to 50% of your kids failing, you only have 4 kids, to me, that makes a difference. So the percentages, although are telling, I would have appreciated, and again, this is my fault. I should have asked for this in advance, and I apologize for that. But if that information is possible, in the next month or whatever, I just would like to look through it.
How's tomorrow,
Rich? You mentioned that in closing for physics, for IB Physics 2, the plan is we're not going to offer that. Is that going to be in effect next year?
Right.
Okay. And I think that's a wise move based upon the results. I mean, and it's not just last year's results. I'm curious is in terms of when you say you're going to offer Physics C, exactly what are you going to do? Are you going to offer the full year Physics C, or are you offering mechanics?
Mechanics, sorry.
Just mechanics?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a question about that. I understand why you would do that, and a lot of school districts do, and I think it's shortchanging our students who want to go into physical science and engineering. And the reason is because now most of the population that are going to take that class are kids that in all likelihood took Physics 1 to begin with. So they've done mechanics already. And the difference between Physics 1 and Physics C mechanics is the math piece, the calculus piece, but physics is physics. And the ideas are pretty much all the same. So if you have a kid who wants to truly go into an engineering field, or again, as a physical science field, they're basically taking 2 years of mechanics and they're never looking at electricity. They're never looking at magnetism. They're not looking at waves. They're not looking at other areas that are really important. So if we're really concerned about preparing our kids to be successful beyond here, I think we need to really think about that again, because we're sending kids out of here into, we have our acceptance rate into competitive colleges is fine, it's admirable. But when they get there, what's happening? You're putting them into places that are, to be honest, more competitive than here, with other students who have a different level of preparation. So my concern is that by doing C mechanics without really considering electricity and magnetism, without considering offering Physics 2 as an alternative, is problematic. And again, don't get me wrong, I understand why it's being done. It's practical. I get it. And that's why a lot of school districts are doing it, but that's why I'm not really in favor of it, because it's kind of the easier way to go. And I don't necessarily think that's the best way to go. So I think it's something that really needs to be reconsidered. And again, I think it's a positive move. I think it's a move in the right direction from where we are, but I don't necessarily think it's the best move. I don't know if you want to respond to that. I'm just venting now, so I'm sorry.
Speaking as a former physics teacher of many, many years, as you know, that's definitely something we can kind of go back and think about. So, I agree with you. One of the things we have done is we have added those electricity and wave concepts back to the first course. So the kids are, but obviously it's not at the same level as the electricity and magnetism course. But, obviously, thank you, and we will discuss it.
In terms of looking at the backup data, the thing that to me was more alarming than just the poor Regents result was the fact that if you look at the quote unquote mastery score of the students for the course, it was almost flipped based upon what happened with the Regents. And I think this maybe is getting to something what Dave was alluding at. It's kind of like, where are they getting these points from? Because they didn't perform well on the exam. And the exam, although it's a challenging exam, it's not an exam that's difficult to pass, because unlike what Mr. Gordon presented us with the history test, the scale on the physics Regents is one of the most generous scales on any Regents exam. So it's not a hard test to pass. It's a hard test to get 100 on, but they all are. So I was concerned when I looked at that, because if you look at the grades, and again, I'm looking at the percentages for the course, it's not even that they don't closely, they're not even in line with what happened on the exam. So I'm just wondering, in terms of feedback during the year, and I know you addressed this in your presentation, Steve, in terms of feedback during the year, how closely are we looking at types of assessments, frequency of assessments, time gap between having an assessment and a student finding out where they fell in that assessment? Because I got to tell you, I'm still in the community and I talk to a lot of people, and a common complaint that I get from parents is, we don't really know where they stand because they took a test 2 weeks ago and they haven't got a grade back yet, or they haven't gotten lab scores back or what have you. And again, this is a general concern. This is not a science concern, but I'm sure it's true across the disciplines. So again, we talked about this a couple of years ago about keeping up with the portal to see what's happening, to make sure that students have a fair representation and a knowledge of where they are, and their parents as well, in terms of what's going on. I think that's really crucial, and I think that the frequency of assessment, regardless of what type of assessment it is, has post-COVID hasn't come back to where it was pre-COVID. Okay, so I think that the students are going through the motions, and in a lot of cases, they're not quite sure where they are. So that's something that again, this is personal, I think really needs to be addressed. And you did address, and you said you're working on that, and I appreciate that. But I think that's something that has to be looked at really carefully. In terms of, the other thing I was looking at the scores on the AP Bio versus the IB Bio. And I understand the IB is an HL course, it's given a different year. I get all that, I know it. Okay, but when I looked at the scores, to me, they didn't fall in line with one another. It looked to me like the AP scores were stronger than the IB scores. And again, I think in my narrow-minded approach to this, I think part of it is we still do a lot of co-seating in these classes, and they're different courses. So I think, I said this a couple of years ago, it's like, make a decision. Do something, but do it well. And don't try and do everything and do it pretty well. So again, and I have nothing to base this on other than looking at the scores and running the numbers through my head. But to me, there was a sort of a disconnect. There's not a huge gap, but there is a gap. And the students that we have taking these courses are extremely motivated. They're smart kids, and the teachers are working hard. I get it, but it's just, there's got to be some reason why this is happening. So I'd be a little bit interested in terms of what you think about that. And again, I want to put you on the spot.
No. I think across the board, it seems like we do better on AP exams than this sister IB exam of the same class. I think speaking for bio, we have on average on a given year, maybe 65 students taking the first year and taking the AP exam. And then the second year, sometimes the numbers are 10 or under for the kids that go on to the second year of the class. So, to some degree that may have an effect if, like you said earlier, if there's only 4 kids taking something and 2 of them don't do well on it, it takes everything down with it. So I think that might be a contributing factor, but I agree those are what you would expect to be the best of our best if they're deciding to go on to the second year and take the exam. These are certainly motivated students that would want to do well.
Back to physics. Last year, when I saw the results, I was visibly upset. And at the time, we talked about, the population taking the exam. And I want to know, this year, will the AP1 students be taking the exam?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Well, percentage-wise, that should make a huge difference. That should be very
You just stole
helpful.
my speech for next year, Rich.
I'm sorry?
You just stole my presentation for next year. But yeah, but I do want to caveat one thing. It's not as I'm sure you know, it's not as simple a fix as just these really bright students are now going to be taking the Regents exam, because I think we would all agree, if you've never been taught something, you still haven't been taught it, no matter how smart you are. So there is work. There is.
I would agree with that if I hadn't done it,
Okay, fair enough.
but I don't agree.
Okay, you're entitled. But there is definitely some work that needs to be done within the AP1 class to cover some of the topics, because the course has changed and they have diverged from each other. I think Regents and AP used to be a lot more in line with each other, and they have made changes. And, so I think the courses have diverged a bit, and we are working hard with Ms. Lamar, who teaches the AP1 course, to help her find the time to cover those topics. And then the other thing about that is the month of May at North Shore High School in a high level class is almost non-existent, because you have these students taking 5 or 6 AP and IB exams in May. The IB exams are 2 days. You never have a full class present at any given day in the month, pretty much, and it does present certain challenges. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Go this way. Go ahead, Mary Ann.
Thank you for the presentation. So some of this is, I'm trying not to repeat Rich because he covered much of my concerns, but I just want to echo on the IB AP dichotomy that when we see this material, we talk about a 4, and a 4 is not getting you college credit. So when you look at those scores in that 4 range, it's not so much the college credit I'm looking at. It's, are they really prepared when they're going to college? And I would argue, because I'm going to tell you, on an HL course, I haven't had 2 kids go to college. They really need a 6 or a 7 to get college credit. Sometimes they'll take a 5. They are never, ever taking a 4. So when you're looking at that, as opposed to where the AP scores on the higher end, I'm wondering, in terms of college preparedness, do we have any information in terms of what's being covered in the curriculum? Because the curriculums do differ, and there is a body of knowledge that is required to be mastered in AP, whereas IB, we write the curriculum, right? So I don't know if the dichotomy in the scoring is a curriculum issue, because generally you have the same type of student taking an IB course that you have taking an AP course, which I think goes back to Richard's point that we really have to pick something, right? So are we looking at the curriculum in light of this, the arrays and the scores?
Know what the curriculums are, and I could say with certainty that we are covering the curriculum as intended by IB. I mean, it's not like we're leaving any topics out or anything like that. I think there's a lot more involved in an IB class. It's not just the preparation for the test. There's usually an internal assessment, at least in science. I think there's a lot of things that eat up a lot of the class time within the course. And I'm not trying to make excuses or fall down on either side of the AP IB argument. But just in terms of your question, if we're looking at the curriculum, we are in the sense that we are making sure that it's being covered and being taught. I mean, with the exception of the COVID year where we purposely had to cut out things, obviously, but since that point, and there have been units that never returned after COVID by, from IB. But we certainly are teaching the curriculum.
It's just a thought. Like, I just think that we're at a point where we have limited resources and we have to make a decision where we're going to jump and where we're going to land. And I think we need to pick what is best for the students going forward. And I don't know how you make that determination. And that's really where I'm leading with that question, not so much college credit, but if the college isn't giving credit for a 4, that means the student isn't prepared for that college course because a 4 is not sufficient. So it leads me to the question of preparedness, right? So that's where I'm going with that. Just something to think about as we look at the numbers and, as we're moving forward. My other question is also sort of centered on numbers. I appreciate the fact that there are teachers that are certified living environment teachers, helping out with the lower population, but it leads me to the question that I asked 5 years ago, which is, do we have too many living environment teachers and not enough other teachers? Are we allocating the resources properly that these living environment teachers have free periods?
Just to clarify, it's not that they have free periods. In other words, when we make out their schedule for the following year, we know ahead of time that we're going to create, whether it's Regents review sections for cycle 4 and 5, or whether it's a lunch and learn experience, which, every other day or something like that. We purposely leave a space for them to do the support work that we know that they're going to need to do. So if you look back at the end of the year, everybody's plate was completely full. And then we have, other electives in the middle school that also take up a lot of the time. So it's not like it's free time. It's time that we purposely leave for creative planning purposes so we can put them where we need them at, when we see the need, we can plug them in as opposed to trying to project what the need might be.
It's where then in living environment, just something
Yeah,
to
I
think
can
about.
I can get you that information. I certainly will when we go over the numbers. I don't know if it's 11.
Some
But-
about the special ed teachers in the room.
The special
No.
teachers aren't necessarily certified in their field.
Some are.
A lot of our 7th grade teachers are also certified living environment, so it probably is close to that number.
Yeah, we have a lot of the science teachers have the dual because it's all within the same tenure area, even though they're teaching different subjects. It's a science tenure area, so they'll have multiple.
certification.
Because I appreciate the fact that you're now having all three teachers have physics regents, but I will tell you in 2017, you had three teachers that all taught a regents class. And the scores for two were unacceptable. And I will tell you a midterm result where 25% of the kids are failing a regents type test is, I mean, unacceptable to me. In 2017, you had teachers with a 25% failing rate, and working with the third teacher that did not have that rate didn't fix the problem. So you know, I think you just, to me, there needs to be much more supervision, and I understand that's part of the plan. But there needs to be intensive supervision and some significant PD and retraining, because I'm not surprised by that result based upon what I know. So I think this could have been prevented. I think that midterm result should have been smoke alarms to me. And the results of 2017 should have been smoke alarms. But, you know, that's what I have to say. So I'm hoping that we are taking this very seriously.
Trustee Cashman.
My turn. Thank you all for a really helpful and informative presentation, particularly as Trustee Colosiopo said, the backup material was dense and informative as well. I always say, and I'll not miss an opportunity to say it again, that I wish I learned math the way that these kids are having the opportunity to learn math, and the flexibility and the priority on process. And I think it's such a gift. Even seeing through my own children, the achievement that they're able to reach compared to my own, is really inspirational. I have a lot of interesting conversations from everyone today. What I'm struck by and kind of want to bring to the conversation is, and I think we win, and I think Trustee Ledmar alluded to this, as a district, I think we win when we focus on the authenticity of the learning, and then what we see then is the grades that follow. And that has been across the board, and it's kind of, dare I say, what makes us in a way. And so what struck me is maybe, and I see that, we have progressions that are pretty prescriptive, and it's easy for me to say because I'm not an educator, but I wonder if there's an opportunity, particularly with the physics problem, is when I look and when I listen to where we are most successful at a district, it's where it's kind of part of our culture and it's ingrained and embedded, and oftentimes multidisciplinary in how we approach it. So I'm wondering, when I see about these amazing opportunities with physical computing, maybe we can highlight and find opportunities to really get more organic and more mindful about really underlining the physics in those processes. So by the time they're taking these courses, it's just more of a natural conversation that they've been used to having. So, because it sounds like this is kind of a lingering problem. Physics is not a new source of challenges to the district, and it seems that way. So I just kind of wanted to offer that thought process. And even when I think about, when I hear you talk about the science curriculum, it's, the next generation's, oh my God, I'm going to say it wrong, NGSS, scientific standards. It seems so prescriptive in a way. But when I think about, and Dr. Smythe and I had a conversation, even with respect to Regeneron and the incredible success that the students are achieving there. There are opportunities to see that through the lens of social studies and capture kids' authentic interests from multi perspectives. So I don't know what I'm not really asking anything, but it just struck me from the opportunity that we have to maybe shift our thinking and how we're approaching this and back up into earlier in the process and just be more meticulous about presenting physics in particular, but all the sciences and in multidisciplinary approach, because it's really when it's most fun.
And I mean, if I could just comment on that, one thing I'm really excited about when they finally do change the exams from the old learning standards to NGSS, the whole point or a huge point of Next Generation is that it's a deeper dive into fewer topics and it's spread out more on that elementary through 12th grade continuum. So that really is the direction that NGSS is leading us to. And then there's also a lot more connections with the engineering principles. So there are opportunities for, to introduce things like, producing physics type engineering devices and things like that within the classroom. So I agree that is a lot more engaging and exciting, and hopefully that's where we're headed. We just have to wait for the exams to catch up with the curriculum.
I do want to add, I think the learning progressions are really key to developing authentic experiences, and the purpose of them is to provide like a purposeful undergirding so that we're not just doing activities for activity's sake. In fact, many of the performance-based assessments that Carol and I have designed over the years are based on learning progression. So it really, I think those are important and not mutually exclusive to authentic and creative exercise. We can provide more information on that and research.
And I would also agree that capitalizing on those early experiences and being intentional about those connections between physics and science in general and math, I think that is something we can, because as you mentioned, that's really where the authenticity lies. And the more we capitalize on that, we build those conceptual schema that kids can continue to develop and build upon. So that's a really good point to build upon.
Thank you. And I think my only point of bringing up the progressions was that from a layman's perspective, it just seemed like you didn't have maybe like there were benchmarks that had to be hit. And so I didn't want to assume that this was kind of an easy thing to include. I just wanted to acknowledge, but I mean, it's all interesting to me. I loved the opportunity within the North Shore learning descriptors. I think that it's fascinating and a great rubric for differentiation, like on a smaller scale, because that's really, that feedback is so important. The only thing I thought is, those kids that are really at that tippy top level, really making sure that we are adding things to challenge them and continue to meet their needs, and really reach their full potential as scientists or whatever the modality is, adding that element. But those are all my comments. Thank you so much.
All right. Trustee Mosca.
I'm pretty sure I have more questions than I meant to have based on what I've heard from some of my colleagues, but I'm going to keep it short. I promise, Andrea. I want to echo, I have to start by echoing that it's a privilege to listen to these presentations. And thank you both so much for incredible analyses. I was really struck by the specificity, Mr. Menchel, of the, at the end of your backup material, where you actually spoke about the specific questions that you think led to, or that clearly led to the gap. It was just a fascinating learning experience, and I very much appreciated it. I have, the only thing I'm going to say about physics is just, sort of referencing it because of those areas of focus. I come at this with a very different approach, and I think I'd love to see some of the areas of focus. I hope you're identifying some of these areas of focus as a reflection that there is broader thinking about some of these tools as well. I like that we think about sometimes reducing the dependence on technology so that we're forcing a different type of thinking with the pencil and paper. I think even you know, the high performing kids, it's so easy for it to happen that some of that fact fluency that they once had, they lose because why bother? The calculator can do it for you. So just on a very, you know, my approach, what I wanted to say before is more primitive, but to some of these, in some of my reactions, but I hope meaningful in some ways. By the same token, holding students more accountable, and going back to what Trustee Ludmar said about reducing the coddling. Sorry to use the same word again, but you know, where extra credit, you know, could be given for something as simple as, you know, writing your name at the bottom of every page, right? So I love that it to me, this is a way of, if it's used judiciously, of making sure that the students really are prepared for college, right? Inflating the grades for maybe not always the best reason isn't doing them any favors once they get to the higher levels of education. So I just thought these were wonderful thinking that I wouldn't have expected at this point, and I was really delighted. I just really want to say thank you for having that, a broader view than I think we often have. I also want to echo what Trustee Cashman just said. The North Shore learning descriptors, just, you know, very exciting actually. And I'm wondering, I think Lisa began to touch on this. Are you considering them beyond the science department, or have you even had a chance to think about that? I'm just.
Steve is piloting, and then
I'll be honest, I think Dr. Z just learned about it. I haven't had a chance to really discuss. It was part of my goals for the year was to work with that. So this kind of organically grew out of both my goals and a workshop I attended. So this was kind of its coming out party to some degree of introducing them, but I felt like the work was really good and related well to certainly to the North Shore journey. So I haven't had those conversations yet, but I hope we have an opportunity to talk more about them.
I just was super quick. We had developed learning progressions for the shared valued outcomes, just as a way of seeing how people are purposefully integrating them into curriculum and instruction. And we saw this with Dahlia's presentation too. Like, and I do see some crossover there. Like, so what the directors are now starting to do with Carol is build the SVO based progressions and really just so there's like intentionality and purpose in what the design is, and then we really don't want the kids. They're like adult documents, I guess the best way I could say. We don't want the kids like interacting with them in a way, unless there's like a reflection piece. But so it is a way. It's not a very exciting way, but a way of taking the SVO, the work we did the SVOs, and like integrating it into the content areas. So, but we will provide more. One thing I'm hearing is like connecting back to the SVOs and how we're using these learning progressions, like more context. Sorry.
Forgive me if I'm repeating in, again, much more primitive form what you just said, Dr. Z, but I see the SVOs everywhere in your North Shore learning descriptors. And I think that's, again, maybe right, emphasizing it with the language is a good thing, but it's definitely here. It's exciting. And I like that. Yeah, I just think from a student perspective, it would be, these are going to be tremendous if you're able to fully implement it. These are tremendous divisions of how am I doing, and motivating, and again challenging, and both. To me, it goes back to holding them accountable and having the honest discussions with them and saying, you're close, but you want to get to that next level. Here's exactly what you need to do. I'm going to stop my comments there because I was just so impressed with that, and I wanted to emphasize it. My last comment is to also just congratulate all of you on these incredible awards that our students are getting. Just such a great accomplishment for everyone in our institution, in our district. Thank you.
You for mentioning that, Maria. It was very exciting yesterday. And we're obviously doing a good job promoting women in science and engaging our girls in science, which is great. I am curious, and I don't know if you know the answer to this or how you would answer this, but we have really invested in elementary STEM more than most schools. And the program has been running a while. Like, do we have any evidence at this point? I know we know anecdotally, but evidence that that investment has led to this later achievement.
I would say most of that would be anecdotal evidence. You know, if you talk to kids, they'll talk about their experiences and its impact on them. But that's an interesting question, and like how we could do a more, you know, quantitative study of that. So
Yeah.
collecting a little bit of data might be an interesting thing, because to your point, I think the first fifth graders that had STEAM are probably now in 11th grade.
And so you could work backwards and say, as we're dealing with these like fiscal pressures, the cuts that we make, how is that going to impact the achievement of students later on? I don't know how you would do that, but there's got to be a way. You know, it's unfortunate that the tests change so much every year, right? So it's not really comparing apples to apples, right? When you look longitudinally, but I would have to think there's some way that you could come up with it, even if it's not perfect. Back fluency part really interests me. You know, you can think about it as like a very controversial issue, right? Almost like phonics versus whole language. I think, you know, I hope that we're using back fluency as like a red flag for kids who might have underlying disabilities, because if kids are struggling with back fluency, it could be ADHD, it could be working memory issues, right? It can be processing issues, processing speed issues. So it could be OT issues, right? If the fact fluency is meant to be written. So I hope that the teachers have some education on like what it might mean, so that we can use that as like a way to pick up these kids early on, not just for math disabilities, right? But for these other issues. And what's also interesting, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, like fluency is important not just in math, right? We also have tests of reading fluency and writing fluency, and that like fluency, automaticity, really issues with that really can reflect much deeper learning issues that impact them across the disciplines. And I'm glad we're again providing all this intervention. It's so important. I am worried what's going to happen moving forward as we have to make cuts. Will we be cutting these intervention services? How does that impact students later on as the concepts build? How does that impact their self-concept if they're struggling? To go to the physics discussion, I think it's interesting, this idea that maybe the students aren't taking it as seriously. I guess I'm reluctant to see that, to believe that, because then you would see it across all of the areas, right? And it seems to be that you have this one isolated area in science, right? So there's got to be something unique about that. Is it like some type of selection bias? Who are the kids taking physics? Is it something in how we're presenting the material that's different? Is it something that's unique to the subject of physics, or unique to the way that the Regents is assessing physics? So like, I'm curious if you have any theories on that.
I mean, I agree with you. I hope it didn't come off like I bought the excuse that I think our students do care. And I think, you know, we spoke a lot about trying to find particular reasons, and, you know, that was just something that came up, so and, I just wanted,
Right.
but, I mean, we really, we think we have a lot of, I think our action plan is trying to approach the problem from a lot of different angles in the hopes that we hit upon some of the, true causes as to what's going on. And, at the end of the day, I think everything comes down to that teacher-student relationship and good teaching. And, I think they are good teachers, but maybe there's some tweaking that needs to be done. And, hopefully with everything that we're trying to do, we hit upon something that we can, build and, that will snowball into better overall effects going forward. We're certainly trying.
And I guess I'm curious if we've asked the students what they need or what they think the problem is too. Like, I hope we've done some reach out to them.
Honestly, I mean, a lot of, like I said, the physics regents is the day before graduation. A lot of the seniors, they take it and, and then
Okay.
it's summer. And so it is. And then next year they're not there anymore. But certainly we can look into speaking with some of the juniors that took it.
In terms of like, we're doing all this early science education, is physics embedded in that? Like, I started to think, well, maybe that's the missing part. Maybe they're not getting early exposure to physics like they're getting with bio or.
It's definitely part of the standards across the grade levels. So for example, at the elementary level, you'll see 3 strands: physical science, life science, and earth science.
Okay. I was also interested about, in the backup, you had the rates of physics passing for disability status versus non-disability status, and actually they were pretty equal. And I think in one box, the kids with the IEPs actually might have done better or just about the same. They did, right? And so I started to think, like, what's going on with that group? Are we providing some services to that group that the general education population is not getting that we could replicate?
That's a really good point. I'm going to take a look at that. I think it also, I also want to see what the numbers, are for, yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
I'm assuming the special accommodation was not in that box. It was, oh, I have it right here, actually. I took a picture of it. Yeah, the disabled students had 57%. No, I'm sorry, non-disabled had 57% mastery and 55% mastery in the disabled students. Mastery levels were actually higher in the disabled population. So, I don't know.
It's an interesting one. I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought that up.
Yeah.
I'm certainly going to look more into that.
Because actually all the other sciences, it was not like that. Yeah. So, and I don't know, maybe that's a function of the N, because the N wasn't, in other words, maybe it just had to do with, like the number of students.
Right, that's why
Yeah,
I
I
asked
don't
what the
know.
number, yeah, I mean, but still, it's definitely worth looking into. I'll take a look at that.
So I think that's everything I have to say. You guys did a wonderful job. That was a lot of work that went into that presentation. And
Right.
yeah, thank you. Thanks. All right, let's keep it moving. We have another, let me just pull it up. We're going to look at our new policy today. Yeah, here we go. Yep. No. Actually, it was an addition.
8B.
Yeah, 8B. Our discussion on the workplace violence prevention policy. I don't know, Chris, if you just want to explain.
Sure, I just give a quick overview. So right at the end of December, we were informed by the state that the workplace violence prevention policy needed to be adopted by schools that had been in place in other public employers. And there was no other real guidance given in terms of timeline. So I was a little concerned about getting this in place quickly, as were my colleagues in other districts. So the policy committee met last week just to start talking about it. The policy committee had a lot of great questions about rollout, about a possible regulation. The policy doesn't commit us to those things. However, on Monday, the Department of Labor did provide a timeline to schools where the other pieces of the violence prevention program, for example, the risk assessment, training for faculty and all employees, and other pieces to that. There is a timeline that ends on May 3rd. So, this is of this year. So this is just an initial policy that we're putting out there, and this does need to be done, what we're proposing to the board tonight, by February 3rd. So we will have many discussions about this at subsequent meetings about where we are in this process. But this is the first step in a 6-step process of things that we need to do to comply.
Any questions, comments?
One thing I'll just say is that it's interesting. It is the way it has to be, but it never mentions anything about right and wrong. And it's worth at least noting here, at least for the record, workplace violence it's an affront to the whole system and to this organization we have. It's not part of a policy, but it should at least be mentioned.
Against it.
Where
Yeah.
it's not just that, it defines why it's not tolerated. It's a safety hazard.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's more than that. But that's my only comment.
One other thing I just wanted to mention, in those guidelines we received on January 8th, it says the Department of Labor, who's handling this, if there is a complaint, will not accept complaints about school district employers until May 3rd. So they are giving us phase-in time to have to actualize this. But
Getting on that. All right, we're going to move to comments from the public. I don't think it'll be busy tonight. I'd like to open the floor for public comments. I will now close the floor for public comments. And we will move to action item 10, personnel, A through G. Do I have a motion? Thank you. I heard a second. Any questions, comments? I know, let's let Dr. Z go first.
no, you. I just wanted to make a quick comment about a retirement action. Miss Elise Kushel. Miss Kushel has been a librarian at the Seacliff School for 20 years and is stepping away mid-year. It's a huge loss. She is a librarian, but a teacher of all the students of Seacliff School. I always refer to her as my social studies teacher at Seacliff School. She taught the students so much about not only literature, but about the world, and was really part of a core team in the school that helped build a vision for the school. So she's an amazing person, amazing thought partner to many, including myself and many parents and students. And I know, I'll use this as a segue, that many families and parents will miss her. Thank you.
I'll second that. I actually had the pleasure of working with Mrs. Kushel on the book fair for 4 years. And even though that week was probably one of the most exhausting weeks of my life every year, I got a little bit of a taste of what our teachers do every day. It was glorious because I got to spend that week with Mrs. Kushel. She just, her love for the children, her love of the job was just so apparent. She just she's brilliant and just a brilliant teacher whose love of reading, love of books, love of knowledge was just infectious. So I am definitely sad to see her go as well. I wish her good luck in her retirement, but it is a big loss for us, and just want to thank her for everything she gave to us.
I just want to add one more thing, which is during the pandemic, if you can believe it, both of my kids wanted to go to online when we were shut down before. They wanted to go to online library because of Miss Kushel. Like, she just has a special way of engaging, and the love of reading that they have, I attribute definitely to her I mean, there's a lot of things, but she was a huge part of it.
We'll get to celebrate her at the retirement party at the end. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I
so-
just say, I want to second, third, and fourth what they said.
All right. All in favor? Okay, keep it moving. All right. We're going to do action 12, A and B, our donations from Glen Cove Mansion. And, oh, I wrote it in. Okay. 11, adoption of the policy we just discussed. Okay. Questions, comments? All in favor? I knew when I wrote it, handwrote it in, I would forget it. Action 12, A and B are donations. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Thank you. Questions,
Discussion?
comments?
Yeah,
Quick,
of course.
quick.
Well, thank you very much for these donations. I am thrilled to see this, the new beech tree for the Seacliff School. I was just curious if you can tell us where it's going. Must be pretty sizable for the price.
I'm not exactly sure where it is going or if they've decided exactly where until it was approved, but I will get you that
That's okay.
that
Yeah.
information.
It-
Yeah, we lost, as you know, we lost a beech tree several years ago. So I don't know if it's going there, but I'll let you know.
the people at school in 40 or 50 years will be very grateful to the Redenti family for this lovely donation. Thank you.
All in favor? Okay, excellent. Action 13 and 14, A and B. Second. Thank you. Questions, comments? All in favor? Okay. Action 15, this is a resolution authorizing a withdrawal from the workers' compensation reserve. Do I have a motion? Thank you. Questions, comments?
I have a question, and not specifically about the withdrawal. So I'm not sure if it's here or new business, but since we're here, I'll ask. So we are self-insured with an excess policy. I'm wondering, do most school districts do it on a self-insured basis? And have we thought about taking a look and seeing if a fully insured policy would be more cost effective?
I know most districts do, so I haven't looked into what the difference would be in a in a fully insured policy, but I will certainly look into that.
So that's welfare funds are self-insured, and when we look at the administrative cost added in with the excess policy cost, we were much better off being fully insured, and it was better for planning purposes as well, because if you have an excess policy that kicks in at $650, but if you get a claim for $650, that could really do severe damage. So just something to think about as we move forward with uncertainty.
All in favor? All right, excellent. All right, 16 and 17 are special ed contracts here. Thank you. Questions, comments? All in favor? Thank you. Unfinished business.
Dave, I'm going to need your help with this. I think it's unfinished business that coming out of the breakfast meeting with the legislators, there were a lot of ideas for moving forward. We got in our backup materials a good list of them. I actually forgot to bring it up earlier. I thought we might review that, or if anybody had any comments on what our next steps should be coming out of the breakfast, just looking for some guidance for the LAC going forward when we meet next week.
I can mention some of those ideas. I just want to thank Trustee Mosca, Trustee Ludmar, all of the members of the LAC committee for organizing a really great breakfast at our transportation depot right before the holidays. Very fruitful conversation. We had a lot of time with our representatives, but we had some real concrete ideas that came out of that. One that we're working on is meeting with Jupiter, who is, we believe, is purchasing the global property and perhaps using that for battery storage. And we want to try and get a sense of the tax structure. Really getting a handle on pilot agreements and setting up a meeting with the IDA and having communication with them. Getting a good sense of the geography of utility properties. You know, we talk about them in terms of pilots and the Nassau County agreement with LIPA, but really getting a firm handle on that. We'll be talking more about LIPA's plan for the future, and you know, there's some confusion about how properties are labeled. We want to continue to learn about the Environmental Bond Act, and we're not sure exactly the direction that's taking, whether that's going to be, we've heard it's grant opportunities or grants that we would have to apply for. Looking at the assessment structure for our area, and looking at how things are assessed and evaluated, maybe talking to the county on that. Other ideas, meeting with the coalition to save Hempstead Harbor. We know Trustee Cashman has a connection there, is our connection there. But they have information on what's happening energy wise because of the nature of their very important work. I also want to look at with Mr. Pappas charging tuition to non-resident students that aren't classified as special education as a way to generate revenue. There are a lot of considerations there, but we are talking to our general counsel about what would be entailed with that. And then exploring the state aid formula, which the Nassau Suffolk School Boards and Bob Vecchio is working on and is in communication with in terms of all of Long Island. But certainly we are now a part of that organization, which I think is a great thing. So I do want to, I think it's important we stay in contact with him about that, the work he's doing there. All right, I think that's
no, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. So I guess when we do our next board reports as well, maybe I'll bring some more specific questions back from the committee, but just wanted to be sure that we felt we had some direction to bring back to them. Meeting again next week. Thank you.
Any other unfinished business? New business? All right, seeing none, I will now adjourn the meeting. Everyone have a safe drive home.